So tonight we're on
Part 11.
I was thinking it was 12, but we actually did the handout for 11
Yes.
and 12, so I couldn't remember which one we were on.
Yes.
But we have a bonus tonight.
With
We have a bonus little handout too. But before we get started on our little handout, it was really cool day today. Lots going on in my world, but when Christy and I were kind of discussing tonight, I kept hearing this cool statement, to what end? And then the big question mark, you know. And I was thinking about, there are all kinds of examples of people taking techniques and programs and attempting to do the same thing, Christian and non-Christian. Everyone's attempting to try to find peace and ultimately some sort of purpose. And so I felt like it was really cool because I felt like that he kind of showed me to what end, the world's methods, they do have to an end, right? And the cool thing about God's methods are they always lead to eternal life. And so there's a little bit, like I said Sunday, more at stake. And I think it's really important that when you begin to think about embarking on something that's hard, it's only hard because you never learned it. So let's just think, I was 29 years old when I learned to dive. So for 29 years, I would just jump in the water at the pool. Now, let me just assure you, trying to get a 6-foot, 29-year-old body in the shape to dive is awkward at best. And shockingly, I know this may seem strange, but we didn't start on the diving board. I learned to dive in 5 feet of water. That means that with my hands extended, I would have crashed to the bottom. But the person that taught me how to dive in a curve, so I never, ever touched the bottom. It was the coolest experience ever. And it's sort of like that all of these changes and all of these ways are just things you didn't learn. So I'm trying to teach you to take the risk of learning how to dive at maybe an older age than maybe what would have been easier if you were brought up this way, right? But nonetheless, it's absolutely doable. We have spent 10 weeks trying to prove your capacity and your capability by God to change at any age. And so that should do away with the old adage that it's hard or that you weren't taught this. Let's stop being mad at the past. Stop being mad at what we didn't learn. Stop being mad at how we were raised and begin to really take this adventure into diving into the deep things of how we are. And I love it because he was telling me that, meditating on his word is biblical. But the enemy always counterfeits it with something pseudo, but it never does have the fruit we wanted. And so remember that godly meditation is, number one, seeing him as he rightfully is. That means I'm trying to train my mind what my mind already knew when it came to earth. I just lost it somewhere. You know how Bill says, where did you lay down your peace? Well, where did you lay down your mind? You left it somewhere, but you still have one. And so we want to know that this supernatural meditation, if you will, thinking on the greater things that we're going to talk about tonight, those are all godly principles that he's trying to expand something in us. And mainly it's our own viewpoint of him and our viewpoint of ourselves, wouldn't we admit? Yes. And so I think the other thing to remember tonight as we're talking is that toxic thinking affects your health. And so, I can give you a lot of examples, but we believe that, right?
Yes.
But let's say tonight that this is an opportunity for you in the next coming weeks to actually identify toxic thinking at a new level. It's not enough to say that's a lie. We have to really identify, in my opinion, how that could really affect us in the long run.
Right.
And the enemy works in a specific way meant to destroy you. He doesn't play fair. Kill, steal, and destroy is what they said in the word. That sounds pretty serious. He's a murderer. He's a liar. He's a robber. So anything you have valuable, right now, he's coming to get it. But see, the greater power is within you.
That's right.
And so that's really what we're going to be talking about. I wrote this little snippet. We are training ourselves to give a rip. And believe that we really can change.
Yes.
We can pursue higher levels of living. We can interact with God in a supernatural way. We can interact with people the way that God intended. The command from God to love Him and love other people, it can be taken to a higher, more appropriate, healthier level forever.
Yes.
And so God never wanted us to be God to people.
So
He
good.
wanted to flow through a people His love. But first off, I have to have this whole and sanctified, sacred vessel to know even how to display this love. I had an interaction with someone at a business the other day, and we would coin the phrase that, he's a jerk, But it was interesting because the owner came and talked to us, and I love the way how that we were able to describe what wasn't going to work for this owner, for this guy to be that way. We could have just simply walked away, and then what would have happened is if someone would have said, "Would you go to this business?" we would have said, "Absolutely not." But because the owner came out and said, "I want to know what happened," then we got to actually tell him what happened. Now, see, we know how to say that in a way that doesn't come across like then we're just a jerk.
Right.
But see, as an owner, and I know this as owning my own business for 27 years, I would want to know. And so I think it's really important. One of the reasons why you want to become really healthy is so you can make statements like that. You can say to the owner, "Let me tell you what really happened." You don't have some edge about you. You don't have some. We don't want something free. We don't need you to give us something free just because you hired a jerk guy. We don't need that. We just want to tell you what's really going on in your establishment. Now, see, if you're not healthy, you need a payback. You need a payback. But see, in that moment, there was no payback needed. I just want to pass this information. And I loved his response. He said, "Well, I will promise you this will be a growing experience for the young man." And so, see, if we'd have left there and we'd have just shot off our mouths and, we were making a large purchase and, he would have said, "Oh, well, they're just that way." You know what I'm saying? So remember that all of this response and self-control we're trying to learn has other places
Yes.
to be demonstrated.
Yeah.
You have this opportunity at work. It's not about just becoming a doormat. It's about actually this kingdom confrontation going on. And it can go on even if they're not kingdom. It's the beautiful thing about it. So I just want to give some honors and kudos to Christy again because she is hard, diligent, seeking out a matter, and she is really working hard to bring all of this delicious stuff to us. I wanted to talk to y'all really quickly about that very first handout. It kind of sets the stage for the night, and on the top of it, it's just called mistakes. And I love that statement. Look at that statement, that very first statement. Why do we keep making the same mistakes? Here's your answer. Has anybody ever wanted to know that question, have that question answered? No? Okay. Does anybody feel like they make the same mistakes over and over and over again? And how does that make us feel? Yeah, so here they are. Look, it's really cool. Look, it's only 4 things. That doesn't sound complex, does it? Can I challenge y'all to read this every day? Yes. Because this is going on in my little world of counseling. This pretty much sums it up. We don't pay attention to the mistakes we make. We brush them off, and it doesn't go away. It passes into our subconscious mind, then our unconscious mind, and we tend to repeat that mistake over and over when similar situations arise. Notice that? Like if you're one of those people where somebody cuts you off when you're driving, just check it right there. Similar reaction every time, right? Get your food wrong at the restaurant. Because everybody's supposed to be treating us perfect because we're just entitled to good service because, we're buying stuff, right? Anyway, she says, over time, we'll practice a behavior so often and spend so much time building it into our brains that it becomes a habit. You don't even know anymore that you're getting mad when somebody cuts you off because you deserve them to not cut you off. Although when you cut them off, you're wanting grace, right? It says, by brushing the mistake away or repeating it, you only give it more energy to grow. Mm-hmm. Number 2, we're unaware of the causes and triggers. Now, around here, that just can't be true. How many times have you heard me say the word trigger? There's always a reason behind what we say and do, a cause and a trigger for our mistakes. By becoming self-aware, we can find the cause of the mistake in the situations that trigger us or lead us to make those. It says once we know these, we can be proactive about managing and fixing them both. Look at that middle line there. If your mistake is hurting people, it needs to change. Mm-hmm. It's less effort. Number 3, to repeat bad habits. An easier and more familiar way of behaving is not necessarily a good one. Good thing to remember. Effort is how we grow, moving us toward what makes us uncomfortable and forcing us to look deeper within ourselves and make changes that will improve our brain structure and mental health. Many people say to me, well, that's just who I am. I know none of y'all are saying that in here, right? Come over closer to me if you are. But it's not who they are. It's who they've become.
Right.
Do you get that really at a deep level? You became that because of experience. It's not how he made you. It's not who you are. Mm-hmm. If it's a mistake that's hurting you or the people around you, it needs to be changed. Mm-hmm. This is a signal for you to put in the effort to change it. Signals going off. Familiarity and ease are not an excuse for you to keep repeating your mistake. Number 4, we are not willing to change. I know that is not a single person in here. We need to ask ourselves these questions. Do I really want to change? Does it worry me enough to put in the effort, or am I content with my mistake and don't really care that people are reacting negatively toward me? We must be willing to put in the effort to respond to feedback when we receive from our environment. That's the people around you, by the way, by changing your bad habit. And I love down at the bottom, it says she gives, obviously, some answers there. So I'm going to let y'all read that on your own, and it's basically how to break a bad habit. So good stuff. All right, well, we're going to start, Mendel's going to start on our handout for this particular week.
Yeah, so I thought I would recap just to get us started. Of course, we are talking about Caroline Leaf's 21-day brain detox plan. And we have, essentially, we've covered, just to remind you, keeping it fresh in your mind, that we've discovered that we have 99% of our brain activity and memories and our thoughts and our operating system is basically stored in our non-conscious mind. And thoughts have been being created and stored in your non-conscious mind since you were in the womb. So you have an entire operating system in your non-conscious mind that your you're not even aware of until something triggers it to come to the surface, where then it comes into the conscious mind, where you not only think it but feel it, because last week we talked about how every thought has an emotional component to it. So you will think, you'll have the information and a feeling to go with it. And then the next stage of any thought is some sort of action that comes from it, and that's that symbolic output, which is where our internal world interacts with the external world. And then we talked about how that works in reverse too. Our five senses that we act with on that symbolic stage, our five senses pick up on things around us that trigger a thought into our conscious mind that then can be planted into our non-conscious mind if we partner with it or so choose, okay, depending on what we choose to do with that thought, with that triggered thing that comes up. And so that goes back and forth. And so the thoughts in our non-conscious mind are like the forest of trees that we've grown our whole life. And those trees, when they are triggered and come into the conscious mind, they become pliable again. They become plastic. And we can use the concept of neuroplasticity to actually remake that thought and emotion, and then send it back into the non-conscious mind renewed. Mm-hmm. And so that is our goal overall, that is the renewing of the mind in a scientific form, okay? Mm-hmm. We bring the thoughts up in our non-conscious, bring them back to a state where we're consciously aware of them. We remake them and remold them according to the truth of God. And then we act on it, which then reinforces the thought, which then sends it back into the non-conscious mind. And if we do that often enough and do this process well, then it becomes a habit, basically. Mm-hmm. We automatize that thought, and it becomes like riding a bike. And so the next time that thought gets triggered, we automatically act in accordance with the truth of God that we've remade that thought, okay? So that's the brief synopsis of the idea of what we're going for. And in her 21-day brain detox, it basically includes doing 5 steps every day for 21 days and to detox one particular negative thought or toxic thought. And after you go through that, you do those 5 steps every day. After you finish the 21 days, then you continue to act on the new belief for 2 more 21-day cycles. And that sends it back into the non-conscious mind, and where it becomes a habit, where hopefully at that point you have automatized it. Okay, so that's the long-term goal. And of course, you can start doing other detoxes along the way. So last week we talked about step 1, and we have been sharing that it's important to understand what's actually happening in each of these steps, so that when we start implementing this, you'll know the importance of it, and you'll have some information to fight the urge to skip one every now and then, because it's really very important, mm-hmm. Okay? So last week we talked about gather, which was that thing I just described about our 5 senses come in. We learned that we have basically an emotional perception library that our body is mm-hmm. very, very quick to alert us of and have a physical response to. So we are fully capable of being right. aware when that trigger, which remember it was like a breeze blowing through the trees, and it could blow through 4 to 7 trees and bring 4 to 7 thoughts up into your conscious mind just with one little trigger. And so the importance of the gather step was that we needed to be aware of when we know things are coming in, when we're receiving things from the external environment through our 5 senses, and that we have a memory coming up in response to that. Right. All of those things we have, and we can physically tell are going on. A lot of us have turned that off, and so we want to become aware of that again and make sure we're being very mindful of that, because if we're not aware, then we're just going to be automatically going through things the way we've always done it. And of course, every time we go through it, we reinforce it again. Every time you use a thought or think a thought, you reinforce that thought, okay? So today we're going to go on to step 2. And let's see, the step 2 is called focused reflection, okay? Focused reflection, Tisa already kind of alluded to this, mm-hmm. but focused reflection is an ancient biblical principle most of us know, but it is also the current rage in neuroscience. She said hundreds of studies are producing headlines like mindfulness meditation may relieve chronic inflammation. Breast cancer survivors benefit from practicing mindfulness-based stress reduction. I thought it was interesting that she is actually currently still doing clinical trials using this very process, like official clinical trials to document the scientific response of this process in patients with different sorts of mental health issues, stress, anxiety, depression, all of that. So that's really cool. It's really cool that this is a really hot topic. And although a lot of these studies talk about Eastern meditation techniques, what it boils down to every time is deep, intellectual, disciplined thinking with attention regulation, thinking, body awareness, emotion regulation, and a sense of self that changes the brain positively. The idea is to basically apply the truths of Philippians 4:8. And so I'm going to read this verse over you and see if you can hear it in here. Finally, believers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable and worthy of respect, whatever is right and confirmed by God's word, whatever is pure and wholesome, whatever is lovely and brings peace, whatever is admirable and of good repute, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think continually on these things. Center your mind on them and implant them in your heart. Okay? That's exactly what this process is all about. Yeah. And
you know, one of the things to remember is, why do we need to do this now? Because, you know, the Bible, to me, is clearly stating what you need to do, but there's so much competition for our minds.
That's right.
You know, and just, I mean, some things I've been saying for years are actually becoming true even in this year, like even our education system and all kinds of things are breaking down because we're, you know, did you know that the government passed, they actually removed that you had to have a college education to work at higher places. Now they're in the government. Now they're going to go by experience. And so the reason why I believe that we have lost our sense of really what the Bible states when it says don't fear, and it says pray without ceasing, it says resist the devil. These are simple things that should work.
Right.
The reason why I believe that Christianity tends to look just like the world is because we actually want to perform a pseudo version of it and put God's name on it so we don't go to the hot place, but we're really not doing actually what the Bible says in its fullness. We're actually doing a mixture all the time, and trust me, just like I always talk about, if you're making a cake and you're going to mix something in there that's not good, it doesn't not make it a cake. And that's the same thing. If you're going to mix all kinds of activities in your mind that we've done, and really, let's be really honest, the media versions of everything are from the enemy. I mean, they are not healthy. And so you're never going to be healthy, and you're never going to thrive and be what God said, a powerhouse of his glory, when your entire mind is a mixture of lies and deceit and a little bit of truth here and a little bit of love here, but then a whole lot of hatred and comparison and jealousy. It's just not going to be possible. And so you have the capacity to begin to train yourself to think and be self-aware. You have this capacity.
That's right.
And without it, you're going to miss out on a lot of things in life. And so I think it's really important to remember that the reason why it's so hard is because we actually presented a different version of Christianity, and we did a disservice to humanity, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And so that's why all of these, what we call kooky, right? You know, all these, you know, New Age, put all kinds of titles on it. Well, they woke up and said, well, we've got to have something new. The church used to teach this, but back in Jesus' day, there was a little bit of teaching going on because, you know, you walk in and you lie in the church and you die. There's a little bit different teaching there, right? But see, we're scared about all of that now because we don't think it looks like love. And we've really, I think, done it a disservice. And so now the road to actually do this with your mind is so much harder because you've been introduced to so much stuff that really makes your soul feel really like it is soothed, but it doesn't yield anything. And so that's why your souls are so big. Does that make sense?
So good. I think that it's really interesting, too, if you go big picture, that, you know, as a Christian, you have to decide that God is the author and the creator, that he designed the way that we operate. He designed our bodies. He designed the world. He designed how we were meant to operate. And so in some ways, even though a lot of people have pulled away from the church, it makes sense to me that the momentum is to find solutions to that would work with the way we are made to work. You know, like we're designed, we're learning here, we're designed to operate with love and peace in our heart and mind. So even those who don't know God are in search of ways to learn that, because they can tell something's off. But of course, ultimately, you've got to go back to the source, the one who has the true authority to tell you what's going to work. And so if you're trying to renew your mind in this way, and you're trying to renew your thoughts, but you don't know what to line them up with, and you just line them up with things that are not going to work still, then you're going to continually have frustration.
Right.
You know, so we are have such a great benefit that we have access to this original. I mean, it's mind-blowing to me that all of this scientific research, just for Caroline Leaf herself, has been over 30 years of scientific research to prove some really basics of Scripture. Like, these truths have been in writing for over 2,000 something years, something like that, right? I mean, this knowledge has been available, but science is now proving it. And I know I love her approach to that she's proving Scripture to be true. She's not trying to do it the other way around. And I love her statement that science is the evidence of God's grace. You know, all of this that we've discovered about our brain is God's grace, that he made it possible for us to really renew our minds and to walk in the way that he designed us to. So again, I like that she points out that throughout the book of Proverbs, we are instructed to gain wisdom and meditate on knowledge until we understand. And I think everybody here knows that in this kind of fast food mentality culture, we don't stay on any one thing for very, very long. And so that Proverbs 4:8 doesn't say think on it once. It says think continually.
Right.
Center your mind on them and plant them in your heart. So we've got to start shifting our perspective. We can't just hear the truth on Sunday and on Wednesday and then go out and expect to be magically transformed.
Right. That's right. It's good.
So again, back to this process of focused reflection. After gathering, which was the step we talked about last week, which disciplines you to be careful of what's going into your brain as well as what's coming out from the inside, then you need to go deep and focus your reflection. This is the process of catching your thoughts and entering into directed rest. I want to encourage everybody to go back and look at the previous handouts, because we're getting pretty far along now in some of the terminology, and we've discussed several weeks ago. And so I went ahead and put it in there just so you would know what to go back and look for. We did talk about what directed rest was a few weeks ago. So the signals and information that you gathered in the first step, they flow through the hippocampus toward the front of the brain for 24 to 48 hours, constantly being amplified each time that it cycles to the front. So each time it cycles to the front. Each amplification makes the thought more unstable and changeable. Okay? In fact, this is really important to remember, it must change. The science of thought demands that change must occur either by reinforcing it as it is or by changing some or all of it. The memory cannot sink back as part of your attitude in your non-conscious mind without being changed in some way. So if you're aware of it, think about this. If it comes to your conscious mind, it is being changed one way or another. You are either going to reinforce it and make it stronger and send it back stronger, or you can change it in that moment. But there's again, no neutral.
Right. Just remember things that even how things escalate even in our world. It's because of the way that people focus on it. And the negative is so easy to see, isn't it? I mean, it never does go down. That's what it's saying, is that it's changing. But we obviously have so much power to do that. Think about something even right now in the negative that used to just be a little thought, and then it's grown maybe through an experience or something. And then all of a sudden now it's a full-blown, jealousy, or a full-blown, offense or whatever. But it's the same way with positive things, just things like I always talk about my one thing, about all sickness is from the devil. When I first heard that, I was like, but then now it's being proven out over and over. And so now it's not even a thought about whether or not that's true or not. I've seen it proven out. So it's the same way. Everything that, like she said, it's changing. It's either changing for the worse, changing for the better, a negative thought, if we focus on it and we don't bring truth to it, it just begins to develop more. Think about fears, even at night sleeping, if you have fears at night, and how pretty soon you got to sleep with the lights on, Right. So it's just, it keeps growing if we don't do something, to reverse it.
Mm-hmm. Which it is great news. This is the key. This is what we need to be able to renew our mind. So it is great news, but it does also emphasize the responsibility that we need to take, knowing what's happening. So, question for you, and go back and ask yourself this question when we leave here tonight too. Just, that now that you are aware that thoughts are unstable and changeable when they're in your conscious mind, can you focus on one in particular and experiment with changing it? Okay? So even though we're not starting yet, just try it. Just try this one part. Just capture the thought and see if you can consciously be aware that you're changing it and sending it back to the non-conscious mind. So this constant change means that the deeper you think, the more change you can make.
So good.
So all those repetitions, remember, in 24 to 48 hours, it's constantly cycling. That means the deeper you think about it, the more times that's going to cycle, and that means the more it's more and more of the tree, so to speak, becomes pliable the longer you think about it. Okay, so the more change, that means the more change you can make. Now again, remember, the step is focused reflection. So it's an exercise that we're going to do, which we're going to eventually just do it, in 1 to 2 minutes. But
Right.
we need to practice not just letting the thought fly by our mind, and actually focus on it and focus on the truth about it more than what we are currently doing. Okay?
Right.
On a regular basis. We're not doing this. It sounds simple, and 1 to 2 minutes doesn't sound like very long, but even with the COVID thing, after they said to wash your hands for 20 seconds, has anybody figured out how long that feels? 20 seconds feels like a long time when you're washing your hands. Mm-hmm. But so 1 to 2 minutes of focusing on one thought and one truth on that thought. We really have to level up.
Right.
And ask more of ourselves here. So remember, we talked about this months ago or weeks ago, mind controls matter. If you say you can't or won't, this decision to say that will actually cause protein synthesis and change in your brain into I can't and I won't. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those are not lightly spoken words that you can just take back later. I mean, you can do something about it later. But you just built something with the first time you said it.
Right.
The first time you thought it and then partnered with that thought.
This is really interesting because, I have this occur a lot in my 2 lines of business. So I have a remodeling business, obviously, and then I have a church. So this happens so much if I ask somebody in ministry to do something they've never done before, I can tell by their reaction to what I'm asking whether they're really going to fall through or not. And so I just in my mind right then, I'm like going, yep, they're never going to do this, or yep, I can count on them to do this. Because I can promise you that if I ask someone to do something, in their mind, they've already decided whether they want to and whether they can. And so if they don't want to and they can't, it never happens. And they might stall out like they may not get back to me for 2 weeks or a month or whatever. And then every time when I go back and say, hey, have you been thinking about that? Oh, no, I forgot. Every time. And so it's the same way like in remodeling, you know, if somebody is unsure of a decision, then I can guarantee that the next time I call them, they're still not going to know. Right. So, you know, it just works. I mean, it just happens. I'm sure you can think about yourself and think about others. And this actually what is we're experiencing relationally. So then relationally in ministry, I know my go-to people who I can say something to, and I absolutely know that they will do what I say or what I ask, and if they, I mean, I just know. And in the same way with remodeling, you know, I know the people who are going to struggle and they're going to complain, and every time we go, it's not going to be right, and you know, you just know because that's already sort of been implemented in our life. And so these are the kinds of things relationally that affect us. Mm-hmm. So it affects me to know I have to know whether that person's going to do that up front or not before I even want to ask them. That affects momentum as a congregation, if you can think of it. If I've got half the people that would do it and half the people that won't, so that means half the time it gets done, half the time you can see the momentum just of an organization is 50% at the most. So it's kind of like you think about that, if you will, relationally, and what all the negative stuff actually does relationally, even just in a little group like ours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a really good point, Ned. I think it's a few steps in, but there's a point in this process where we need to recognize how toxic our thoughts are, like what effect it does have on us, that it's not just a bad feeling in me, but it does affect those around us and other things that we really care about. So that's really is important to keep in mind. So ask yourself this question, you know, practice, like I said, bringing a thought into your mind and actually capturing the thought, thinking on it longer than you're used to, and realize that you have a decision to make in that moment. Ask yourself, do I want to build memories out of this new information that's come into my mind? That's you have a choice right there. What am I going to build with this thought? What kind of thought do I want to build? Do I want to leave it the way it is currently when it first came into my mind? So imagining builds physical thoughts. This is really interesting, but research has shown that mental practice, like imagination, visualization, deep thought, and reflection, actually produces the same physical changes in the brain as would physically carrying out the same imagined process. So just thinking through it activates the same parts of your brain as if you were actually doing it. There's a couple of cool scripture references there. We talked about Genesis 11:6 a few weeks ago, where God says that nothing they have imagined they can do will be impossible for them. This was a reference to the story of the Tower of Babel, which they had a wrong motive and agenda, but God points right there to humanity's ability. So nothing that they've imagined will be impossible for them. And then faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. These are scriptural backings for this practice that's actually now proven out to be happening in our brain. Rehearsing things mentally is a great everyday example of how you can think and more deeply reflect on daily actions, because each time you do this, you change the memory. So let's say you were just changing like your driving habits or something. Before you actually got in the car, you could actually picture yourself, imagine yourself, you know, driving to work that day. Maybe it's even you just want to take a different route, you want to go a slower speed, whatever it is. You can actually rehearse that in your mind before you do it, and that will in itself help rewrite that memory. That remember, you're later on, you're going to, because it's been automatized, you're going to operate out of whatever you've programmed in, essentially.
Right.
So this process of focused reflection is really, really important and really powerful. She lists the examples, which I have seen this on TV, where a surgeon first mentally rehearses each precise step before performing an operation. And similarly, athletes do before a game sometimes. So as you mentally rehearse it, the newly built memory becomes increasingly stronger and begins to grow more connections to neighboring nerve cells, integrating the thought into other patterns. That's what leads to this automatization that we've talked about, okay? So the more you think it, the more automatized it's going to be. So this rehearsing, it can be a really powerful tool. It can also be a negative tool, which I would propose more of us have done that than the other way around. So it asked here, have you ever found yourself rehearsing something over and over for days on end, almost like you couldn't get it out of your head? How did that make you feel? Well, I can tell you how it made me feel on a negative. It was miserable. It's terrible, terrible, terrible to keep going over and over something like that. So it's really just evidence of how powerful the process is.
Right.
You know,
It's so good.
what a powerful response we even physically have to ruminating on something like that. And we can take that around, turn it around and apply it in a positive way, and it can be a really powerful tool for us. So, of course, we can tear down these toxic strongholds by choosing to bring the thought into the conscious awareness for analysis and then changing it through repentance and forgiveness, which she's tying together here to say that this process of thinking about it, repenting and forgiving, actually also causes protein synthesis in the brain and replaces it with correct information when we do that. That's applying the scripture, Philippians 4:8. So there's this interesting part on the contribution of the heart. Your heart is not just a pump. It helps with decision making and choices, acting like a checking station for all the emotions generated by the flow of chemicals from thoughts. Who knew, right? Every single cell is connected to your heart. Every single cell in your body is connected to your heart. And because your heart responds to and is controlled by the brain, that means every single cell in your body is affected by your thoughts. Every cell. Every cell. That one in your pinky toe right now is being affected by your thoughts. I mean, think about that. That's really, really powerful. Your heart is in constant communication with your brain and the rest of your body, checking the accuracy and the integrity of your thought life. As you are about to make a decision, your heart pops in a quiet word of advice. When you listen to this advice, it secretes the ANF, which is a hormone produced by the heart that regulates blood pressure and can give you a feeling of peace. So one application of this to me, I know when I first started coming to One Life and I wanted a lot of help on how to make decisions because I didn't like the outcome of the way I'd been making decisions, you know. And so we talked about, you know, choosing the path of peace and, well, actually paying attention. Do you have peace with that decision? And realizing that we can use that as an indicator because the Holy Spirit does use peace. We get to experience peace, and the spirit of peace rests on us when we operate with him and with his leading. And so here, once again, is a physical, scientific proof that this is happening. Okay, this hormone is being released. So our heart is trying to help us out here in this process. Okay, next section is really, really cool. Expertise. When you think deeply to understand, deeply, when you think deeply, I have to emphasize that again. Not on the fly, not just real quickly while you're doing 10 other things. When you think deeply to understand, you go beyond just storing fact and answers to storing key concepts and strategies that can help you come up with your own answers. So this is how we see people in our lives that operate with a lot of wisdom. Then these positive thoughts that are in line with the way God designed us to operate have become so consolidated and stabilized in them that they have immediate access to them. So we ask them, what should I do? And they immediately know. Or they have something come up in their own life, and we see this in operation, right? We've got some people around us that operate really well with this. And this is why. Because they've actually become an expert in not just a single thought, but networks of thought. Remember, it's like an entire operating system. So when we think deeply in this process, when we think deeply, we can actually move towards this process of storing concepts and strategies that can then be pulled back to our conscious mind, not just one thought, but an entire strategy.
I think it's good to, one of the things I think that helped change me a lot in this area is that I knew that there was nothing new going on with humanity. I think I remember thinking that as a teenager, that this has all gone around before, and so either humanity moves toward inability to love, or we move toward love. And so when you begin to think that all of God's concepts are true, that's just, like I want to prove out God's concepts in every single way that I possibly can, then you're kind of working from a positive. You're in the process of proving truth to be true. And so when I hear something that doesn't make sense to me, I really go to him and I try to find out, well, what makes sense to you about this, because this is truth from you. And I think that does develop wisdom in our hearts when we're proving out truth to our own selves, as opposed to, I think a lot of times what we do is that we kind of just want our way, and we kind of want, I read this little line that Carolyn Leaf said today. She said, we should celebrate getting negative feedback because it's one of the best ways to increase motivation, and it makes positive feedback so much more enjoyable. She said you can't avoid negative feedback or criticism your whole life, so it's worth learning how to use it to your advantage. And I think that's a really big key. I can tell you that for me, that's true. Like it doesn't feel negative to me when somebody tells me I've hurt them or somebody tells me I didn't do a good job. It gives me an opportunity then to ask them, how could I help that more? I mean, just today, I sent Christy this little snippet. I was trying to think, where did I send that to you on? Okay. Hang on, I'm going to read it to you. It is 2 ways of listening. I should have put the graphic up there. One is empathetic. I'm going to send it to you. One is empathetic listening, and one is, hold on, dismissive listening. I sent it to them. Maybe they can pop it up. So empathetic listening, in parentheses, it says, I want to hear you. And dismissive listening, in parentheses, it says, I want to fix you. And so that was really interesting to me because, Chrissy falls in that highly sensitive person category. And so that's an injury of hers, is feeling dismissed, but I figured out today this is why, because when she's talking, my responses give her one of 2 things. Either it says to her, hey, you got a problem, I need to fix it, even if I'm not intending to do that, or, hey, I want to hear and understand what you have to say. And so it's really cool that all of these tools are really relational. They really are. They affect your relationships to such a deep degree. That's why deep thinking is worth it. And it's not just deep thinking about yourself. It's deep thinking about getting a new concept or a new perspective on what you are currently thinking. And so I think it's really good. I think it's just all kinds of tools out there available to help us grow.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that you do really well, Tisa, is that when you do get a negative feedback or something doesn't quite go the way you intend it, then you're really, really quick to learn. You're really, really quick to seek out an answer and then apply it to what you already know. So you do this process that we're talking about, I think, really naturally all the time. A thought comes to your conscious mind and you restructure it, like, oh, and it needs to be tweaked? Okay, great. I'm going to retweak it, send it back. A lot of us are battling with double-mindedness in that same moment, and so, or we've got multiple triggers coming up, and so we're not. So she's so open to receiving new information and tweaking the thought, but a lot of us, I think, are stuck where we have a thought come up, and then we hear the new information and the new truth, but we're not entirely sure we agree with it yet, and we stay stuck there for a really long time. And this is what I'm hoping this process and this 21-day detox and really learning what to do in that moment will benefit us, where we can move to a point where we're saying, okay, this is the truth. I want to align my thought with this truth, and I'm sending this truth remolded back into my non-conscious mind. And then we can participate with the process of renewing our mind instead of sort of kicking our feet along the way and, shooting ourselves in our own foot. And so then this process, like we see Tisa do so well, it becomes real easy.
Right.
And then you eventually, over a period of time, Tisa has lived most of her life with in agreement with really godly principles. And so her non-conscious mind, her forest of trees since she was in the womb, is filled with thought systems and strategies and automatized thoughts and systems that are totally in line with God's ways and God's teaching. And so she has an entire foundation that comes to the surface that's really, really solid and gives her a lot of expertise in. We will be building that ourselves along the way. Over time, if we continue to do this, then there'll be fewer and fewer things that are in conflict with the Word of God, or in conflict with truth. And so we're working towards that, where we can really easily tweak that, and then we can actually become experts. Yes. We can become experts in how to operate. And that's where, like Tisa was saying earlier, we as Christians can start operating in a way that with the world around us, and we can look to other people like someone who actually knows how to operate in peace, knows how to operate in truth and in power and make an impact on the world and have good relationships and on and on and on. And this is the difference between it's just so heartbreaking to me that so many Christians are talking the talk but not walking the walk. And that's why, sadly, Christianity has gotten a bad name, because all of these people who are looking for answers are like, well, you must not have it, because you're just as sick as we are. You're just as unhappy and dysfunctional as everybody else I see. And yet you claim one thing. You say one thing with your mouth, but you actually believe and operate out of something else. So I think it is of the utmost importance that we have got to take this so seriously, that we have got to start believing what we are saying, believing what we are being taught at church, believing what we are reading in our Bibles, and actually integrating it into our minds, and to be something that we actually operate out of. It's the only way that people really will see God for who He is and see Him as a good, good Father as He really is. Right. It is literally the only way. Yeah. Because we can say it all day long. We can send it out on the web. We can put it on SoundCloud. We can sing about it, write about it. But if we aren't living it, it's not gonna. No one's gonna buy into it.
That's right.
So, focused reflection, so important with this process. For building, for protein synthesis to consolidate, stabilize, and become part of you. Repetition and rehearsal in frequent spaced intervals is necessary. So again, remember, we're going to be doing this every single day for 21 days, focused reflection. So then we will move into the next 3 steps, which are writing and then revisiting and then the active reach. And that's how we're really going to get into the forward momentum of changing the thought with those steps. And we can take advantage of this process of how we were designed to become experts in truth.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to move on. We're going to go ahead and cover step 3 tonight also. This is also really interesting. She says that your brain actually writes through genetic expression. So when you write things down on paper or type it into your computer or your iPad or whatever gadget you use, you are mirroring this process. So the actual process of writing consolidates the memory and adds clarity to what you've been thinking about.
So
We've all felt that before, I think, right? When you write it down, it's a really important step, but a lot of people don't ever take that step. It helps you better see the area that needs to be detoxed by allowing you to see your non-conscious and conscious thoughts in a visual way. It's almost like putting your brain on paper. Now, on the science side, she said that there are these intricate bundles of neurological networks called basal ganglia They're interconnected with the cerebral cortex and help the hippocampus, frontal lobe, and corpus callosum turn thought and emotion into immediate action. Lots of parts of the brain.
She just rattled that right off.
Yeah. It's easy to say, not remembering where they all are is the harder part. But we do remember, right, the hippocampus was the clearinghouse where we sort, and a lot of it happens at night. I don't know if you guys practice this, but last week I went to bed sometimes praying for God to help my hippocampus. I was like, hippocampus, I know
I
you
said
do your
hippopotamus, but it meant the same thing.
It meant the same thing. Yes, yes. I asked Papa to help me, help my hippocampus. You two work together tonight. Yeah, we need to pray over our hippocampus, right?
It worked too.
It did work. It really did work. Absolutely. So all of this is really to say that, to show us all of these different parts of the brain, they all work together in harmony with a single thought. They are all working together, okay? She said that the basal ganglia help ensure that the memory gets built into the trees in the cerebral cortex, and it smooths out our fine motor actions and sets the idle rate for anxiety.
That's so good.
So together with the motor cortex of the brain, the cerebellum helps you write down the information that you've just understood. The cerebellum also helps with cognitive fluency, which is the ability to flow through a thought process smoothly as you evaluate the options. As your brain structure, all of your brain structures become very, very involved in the writing process, okay? The level of involvement of these brain structures in the writing process enhances the process of detoxing and restructuring our thoughts. So, I don't know, an analogy is basically you're not just going into one room of your house. You're turning on the lights in every room of your house when you have a thought. Your entire brain is active. And when we engage in this writing process, that's even more true. By writing our thoughts down that we focused on in the step prior, we activate so much of our brain that it's like that. In my mind, I picture it as it's that much more of our brain is available for change. Okay? The deeper we think, the more we're going to understand, the more change is possible. And then by taking it a step farther, by writing it down, we actually activate and engage multiple parts of our brain, by which then, again, it's increasing the plasticity of the thought by doing this. Okay? We want this to be a moldable, really pliable, changeable thought. So these 3 steps are bringing with each step, it goes up, 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 up. The likelihood and the availability for the thought to be changed.
That's good. That's right.
So we don't want to skip the writing step, okay? So how to write your thoughts. This is really interesting. She said how you write down your thoughts is important because there are ways that work more effectively with your brain's processes. She said be creative with your notes. Be playful with your thought journal. Don't limit yourself to just writing in straight lines. If there are word associations or groupings that seem natural to you, as you focus on information, group those together. Just kind of let it flow. Let it flow and be creative. Don't try to restrict it. Okay?
I think it's cool because sometimes I have a really common feeling that I feel really overwhelmed with how much I need to do. Does anybody else have that? Stop. I thought I was the only one in the world that had that. And, it's when I think, sometimes when I sit and think about all that sort of I have to think about, I'll just occasionally I'll get a big old one of those dry erase boards, the really big ones, and I'll just go and I'll write everything in clusters on it. And there's just something about that process that's really, really helpful. And I don't know, I think that if you can develop, I think a lot of times people feel like they have a lot of thoughts, and especially people who have little habits like biting your nails or twisting your hair or, all the little things that we do. Those are a sign that your brain is working and you don't even know you're doing that because you did it probably when you got nervous or something at one point. I call them little tics. And I think one of the things that happens is that when we've never thought deeply or we've never tried to organize our thoughts, that's part of the thing, is that we really are out of the habit. But your thoughts are meant to be, in my opinion, categorized and organized. And when you sit down and do learn some sort of process to do that, I promise you, your little tics will begin to go away, because it's something within you that knows you're going to handle it, that knows that it's on your grid, that knows that you have a source somewhere to go to. And see, your brain's not a notepad. And for all of you that are trying to make your brain be a notepad, your relationships are suffering and you don't even know it. And so it's really important. I keep saying this, but I really want to encourage y'all to do this. But if you don't want to do it, just please say, because we are really pouring so much effort and resources and money and time into this push. And so if it's not something you're interested in, I think it would be helpful to us as leaders just to know, so that we know that's not something you're going to do. Nobody's going to be mad, but we're going to have expectations, right, of each other, that relationally we're going to all be doing this, and those that agree to do it. And so then we have an expectation we can speak to if relationally we're seeing that some of these things are kind of, falling down on the job. So I think it's really important that we've got to begin to take matters sort of in our own hands and make some sort of process where you are not so filled with scattered thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I think it will really help you. We've been doing this all through June. Everybody that was willing, and I know that everybody didn't participate, but everybody had an opportunity in June to begin to write down their thoughts with their mentor. And so that was a really important exercise. We did that in June to prepare you for this. And this we're doing to prepare you for something else. So remember, everything is in prep for something else. It's not just some random willy-nilly thing I just woke up one day and decided to do. It's all a process that we're planning out. And so keep that in mind, that if you didn't do that process in June, this is probably going to be a little bit overwhelming. But those that did do it, it's going to really give you some momentum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that overall, an overarching purpose to all of this is to become more self-aware. You know, a lot of people are just not self-aware. We're not operating in self-awareness, or
Mm-hmm.
we're at a certain level, but we don't go beyond that in our
Right.
self-awareness. And so, a lot of these steps or tips are how to do this particular 5-step process, but you will learn things about yourself. And part of the process is learning, how do you think? What makes sense to you? What does go together
Right.
in your mind? How does my mind actually work? And so you may discover, like she's saying, that, writing that out actually helped me today, and I didn't feel so scattered. Mm-hmm. I can apply that somewhere else, like she's
Right.
saying, not just for these 5 steps.
Right.
And we're going to try to give some more detailed instructions and examples once we get to the implementation stage. But remember, for this purpose, this step is still bringing the thought to the surface into the cognitive mind, and really incorporating it and re-engaging all of the brain so that it's all ready to do something with it. So part of this step is on the negative thought. Okay, you may have associations with your thought that don't go together when truth is applied, but for you they go together. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so this isn't the time to only write down the thoughts that are approvable or you think are going to look good. This is writing down what you really think.
Right.
And you're going to write, this is something you're going to build on over the 21 days. So you may discover little pockets or other branches, basically, that you're going to continue to search out and write on off of your original thought. So be honest. Like we said last week, you've got to be honest with yourself in this process. So she said also it's helpful to draw a picture or a diagram along with that thought, if that's helpful. Add color and texture. She said, pour out the impressions in your mind onto the page. I think in addition to being honest with ourselves, we've got to give some more value and validate what's actually going on in our mind. Because you're not a horrible, human being because your thoughts work that way. It's just you got there somehow, but we can't do anything with it, and we can't renew it if we aren't honest about it.
And this is really similar to Art Sozo. This is sort of another take off of something like that where, it's a little bit different angle. But I just think about if we all did this detox, what kind of an art sozo we could have then. Because a lot of art sozos are just about trying to get the negative out. But really, the point of sozo, salvation, is to expand our future, not just get rid of pain,
The Metacog, is this next section, is a method that Dr. Leaf teaches. This is just one option for when you're writing, okay? It's a method that she teaches students who are in the process of developing their learning and retention skills. I think we have a graphic to put up there. It's just to give you an idea. You don't have to read all the words right now, and it's on your handout, but it's just to give you an idea of what it looks like. It involves grouping patterns that radiate from a central point. Each pattern linked to the central point creates a branch. Then you continue to develop each of the branches by linking more detailed patterns. So the process can continue until you've explored every nuance of your thought.
I love this because, of course, I love charts and pictures, but I love this if y'all could think about doing it, actually developing your thought life you could do this on a single thought.
Right.
Can y'all imagine how cool that would be? Because then you could really understand why you feel the way you feel, and it would be it's so much easier to change it. And we have so many thoughts that we're actually responding to, and no one even knows it.
Right.
And we're having relationship issues because we're responding to all these thoughts when we're actually doing things in relation, and the other person never even hears them. And so then it's you can't get somebody to do something they said they were going to do. That's why, is because they're actually having a completely different thought. I've been talking to leadership about this a lot, that if you continually have someone that says they want to do something, but they continually they're not doing it the same way, it's because they actually have a thought in there that's opposed to what you're suggesting. They just didn't say it out loud. So that's why they're unable to perform or unable to go ahead and do the thing they're saying they want to do, because they're actually having a thought that's against it, but they never do. And this would be a great way to sort of diagram or digraph it and, really try to think about more ways that you think about something. I do this all the time. I always think about, why am I feeling like I'm feeling? Why am I thinking that? And I try to flip that around to what really is the way that would bear fruit. Every thought's bearing something.
Yeah, like remember when the breeze blows through the trees, it was 4 to 7 different thought trees get activated. So it makes sense to me that if I hear something from you, an instruction or something like in your example, then it could very well bring up another 5 thoughts with that thing. And so if we're not self-aware to what's kind of interconnected with each other, then like she said, we may be off dealing with the secondary or the tertiary tree that the breeze blew by, and forgetting about the first thought, which was actually where they were needing our attention or we needed to do something. So I've done this, I know, without actually doing this process, where I've recognized which things are connected for me. So I know I have guilt can come in really big with me, and I tend to be over responsible. So I know guilt and over responsibility, those are interlinked. So if I'm having an over responsibility trigger, you can probably bet there's some guilt that's trying to come in somewhere.
Yes.
There's things like that.
Yeah.
There's things like that are linked for us, and just doing this process, you may discover which things are linked. And remember, I saw her say this today, that just identifying it or even recognizing that you messed up is progress. Because remember, we are really, I think, as a culture, suffering from a lack of self-awareness. It's a pandemic, okay, of not being aware. And so just our awareness of what's happening is we're leveling up with just the awareness. So remember, don't beat yourself up. Don't go into condemnation in this process. That's just going to sabotage it. There's no point to it. And I also want to say, remember, she said that you can write this out on your computer. If you want to do this electronically on your iPad or however you want to do it, I'm going to take away that this process, this Metacog diagram here, I may try to do it on my computer. I can color code on my computer. I can do a little diagram, or I can just in my mind know that this is here and then that leads to this. And I might have 15 bullet points and sub-bullet points. Who knows? But don't feel like you have to do it this way. This is just one suggestion. But you could take the idea and apply it to whatever method you're going to write with.
Yeah, and I think it's good, even like people you're in close relationship with. Like, I love to hear Christy say, I know my over-responsibility and my guilt go together, because I know, I'll have that experience with her, but just the fact that she can say it, then I'm like, oh, yeah, she's recognizing it, and so I know she didn't like either one of those things. Right. And so, it's like then that is a topic we can sort of breach. But it's like when you don't say anything to everybody, they're actually having an experience that you're experiencing something.
Yes.
But when you give language to it, it's like it opens the door to the people you're in relationship with. Oh, okay, so you do see that you're doing that. Okay, like I'm having this experience where you're doing that all the time, but I didn't know we could bring it up. And so then it just breaks down. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It breaks down those walls like we talked about tonight, so that you have an more open access. Because we're all just trying to hide stuff that is ridiculous because it's not being hidden at all.
It's not.
And so just try to especially with people, your mentors, just try to really go there. Try to really go into a deeper place and really dig some of this stuff out.
Mm-hmm. So on our last point, from a scientific side, why this is important, to be creative, add color, don't write everything necessarily in a straight line. She said this method of pouring out your thoughts encourages both sides of the brain to work together and to integrate the two perspectives of thought.
So good.
So we've all heard about left-sided brain, right-sided brain. One's like logic, one's creativity. Basically, she's saying the left side of the brain looks at information from the detail towards the big picture, and the right side of the brain looks at the information from the big picture down to the detail. So for a full understanding to take place, which will ultimately result in the conversion of short-term memory to long-term memory, both perspectives of thought need to come together. So that makes sense to me. We want to activate both sides of our brain in this writing process. We don't want to be, and some of us we have tried to really, minimize our emotions, shut it down. We operate from logic only.
Nah.
Some of us, it's the other extreme.
Yeah.
We've got to recognize we need both. So don't just, I tend to do the shut down the emotions, just purely logical. Don't analyze your thought with just a purely logical approach. How do you feel in the moment? Like, what's going on? Remember, we're more aware of our senses. Like, add some color and depth and texture. Like she said, get creative with it. This needs to be a representation of the real you, not a textbook, okay?
Yes.
And likewise, don't just ramble about how miserable you feel. Also, make sure you're thinking about the details, okay? However that would work from the other side, You
don't even know, right?
I don't even know. But don't trail off and forget, don't do all color and no words, Maybe that's what would happen.
I feel like a blue square today. I don't know.
Maybe it would be doodles.
Yes.
Doodles. And
I think it's really cool because I think that, like, I'm really aware that I'm more big picture than I am detail, and so it's really good because I had to train myself to be detail oriented at some level. And so I think it's really important to think about which side that you kind of lean toward being more, and then practice on the other side, practice with some things on the other side, because it really does expand. If you look at it, everybody has both sides of a brain.
Yeah.
Everybody. So we just did what we were really good at a lot more.
That's it.
What we were comfortable with a lot more. That's really all we did. I remember the first time I said to Shooty, you cannot lose the keys anymore. It's just like that day has come to an end. She's never lost the keys again. You cannot leave your credit card at the restaurant anymore. Then she quit leaving her credit card at she implemented because, she's more big picture, more than detail the same way. And so we can train ourselves. It's just that we put more effort towards something that came natural in that way, or that we were more comfortable with. And so the other way, we've almost talked ourselves out of thinking we're intellectually incapable. Now, I'm sure none of y'all have done that, but I've heard of this. I've heard of people acting like they're intellectually incapable of working on that other part, but you're just not.
Yeah. Well, again, like to me, I can see the value of all of these steps in a lot of detail, and I think I would really encourage everybody to go back and reread the handouts, rewatch the training sessions, to familiarize yourself with this, because it's a lot of information to take. I wanted to do like all 4 steps tonight, but it was just way too much information, and so we had to say no to that. But so it's a lot of information to cover, but we want to really understand what is behind the steps, so that when we go to implement this, we will have some knowledge of it. You don't want to have to read up on it the night before and to learn how to do it. Remember, I did hear her say that when we first get started, these 5-step processes may take more like 20 to 30 minutes for us. Okay, in the book, she talks about it being like 5 to 7 minutes or 7 to 10 minutes, something like that. But that's after you get used to doing each of these. As I said, we're really not used to this. We're not familiar with taking these steps and slowing down enough to, like I said, even wash your hand for 20 seconds. We're not used to stopping and focusing on a single thought for 2 minutes, 2 whole minutes. So we need to really familiarize ourselves with this information, what's involved, and be prepared, because next week hopefully we'll be sharing on the last 2 steps, and then moving ahead. And of course, it's just adding more and more information. So,
it's good. Y'all excited? Yes. Well, I really want y'all to be thinking about your participation level. It's really obviously a participation sport. And remember, this is something we would like for y'all to think about implementing the rest of your life, like brushing your teeth.
Yes.
Right? And it will get easier. It's easy for me, and so it's not, I don't have all the scientific data, but I just know that it's really fun to be really free in your mind. Yes. You can just, you can do so much more with your life when you're free up top, and God doesn't want us to live with shame or guilt or any of that negative junk. That's all from the enemy anyway. So I'm really excited. I hope that you'll really be thinking about participating and be aligning your heart with participation, speaking over your life that you can do it. Be thinking ahead about when you'll do it. I really encourage everyone to do it in the morning. Be thinking about setting up your schedule, going to bed earlier, setting up your schedule where you can get up, getting a routine down, doing it at the same time every day is really, really vital and important and will really be helpful. And then you'll have a routine set up. Every day when I wake up, I do something really, really similar every day, because it sets my mind toward a direction. And so it's really important to be thinking about this and not just getting it up at random times and everything, just trying to set up some structure. And if you need help, you're going to need to try to contact a mentor to maybe help you start this, and that would be really good to be thinking about that now, who you would be able to count on to help you do it. I really want as many people, it would be great to have a large percentage of us be really successful, and think about what we can do with ourselves when we're free in our minds. I hope at least one thing is that I could be an example to you of what it looks like to live in peace and harmony with how God made you and how he wants you to yield to the Holy Spirit. And, I wouldn't even call it work. It's just a daily routine. Like I keep saying about brushing my teeth, it's not a big deal. It may be harder at first for some, depending on how scattered our minds have been. But I hope that you can see this whole year we've been preparing you for this. And this has been we have literally done this for 11 weeks, and they haven't even all been in order, but it's been a long time since back in March we've been starting this. So it's the whole year's word coming true, and I just think it's really encouraging. So I want to pray over us and just really be thinking about those things. Like Chrissy said, I really encourage you to go back and listen. If you've missed a lot of time or a lot of weeks, you're not getting it. I don't want anybody to say that they didn't do it because they didn't get it, because there's all this help available. So Papa, we just thank you for tonight. I just bless Christy, and I bless the anointing on her life to really bring truths from this really cool scientific perspective. We're just so grateful that she has this gift within her, and that you have equipped her, and that you've anointed her. And so I just want to bless her, and I ask that you would actually repay her for even all the pushback from the enemy that's been occurring in her life for trying to bring out this truth. And I ask for just a clarity this week of even how to speak about the steps of completion and implementation. And so we just say, as a tribe, we are so excited that we get to be a part of training our hearts and our souls and our minds for things that other people are going to need. And I'm just asking for people in this room to become expert brain trainers, that people in this room are going to get this at such a deep level that they are going to have opportunity to actually retrain this course in other instances. And so I just speak that over us today, that there's some people in this room that really want to attach to this and really want to be free in this area. And so I just bless everyone that's watching tonight. I bless that anybody in their hearts that have really been struggling in their minds, I just speak healing over them. I wanted to just read this one thing over us, that her perspective, Carolyn Leaf's perspective on mental health. She said, along with other mental health specialists and psychiatrists and scientists, she agrees that mental health is not a biological disease. Rather, it is the result of living in the world full of challenges, and it is the human condition. And so I just thank you that we can change our mind today even about mental health. I thank you that we don't have to be on medications. I thank you that we can be free in our minds, and who the Son has set free is free indeed. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.